Now let's go to Canberra and catch up with the Assistant Finance Minister Zed Seselja. Good to talk to you again, Zed. I wanted to ask you first up about this issue of Australians trying to come home. Well, actually, let's start off with Matthias Cormann, your former colleague as the Finance Minister. Is the expense of flying him and DFAT officials around Europe to lobby for this OECD job justified? Is his position for Australia as much as it is for him?
Well, look, I think it would be an extraordinary thing for Australia if someone of the calibre of Matthias Cormann were to head up the OECD. I think that he is someone who has obviously distinguished himself in Australian politics, but to have an Australian in such a senior international position, I think would be a moment of great pride for Australia, but also I think very, very important diplomatically. So, you know, it is something the Australian government is very keen to see. We're very keen to see Matthias get the job. It's not an easy process. There's a lot of competition for it, but he'll be putting his best foot forward and he'll certainly have the very strong support of the Australian government.
Now, as I pointed out in my editorial at the start of the program, Labor's attack about this somehow contrasting it with Australians not being able to get home is just cheap and tacky, because it's not the lack of flights or aircraft that's preventing Australians from getting home. Nonetheless, 36,000 people are desperate to get back here. What can the federal government do to increase or speed up quarantine processes to help them get home?
Well, you're right, Chris, to say that it's a pretty disgraceful sort of attack and a very dishonest attack. But when it comes to the issues of returning Australians, I know there was a flight coming into Canberra today, but what the constraint has been obviously the numbers in hotel quarantine, and we are working with the states and territories to build that capacity to support them in every way we can. We are very aware of the need of Australians wanting to come home. We've prioritised vulnerable Australians. We've had many, many thousands of Australians who have been able to be returned in the last couple of months, but the constraint continues to be the amount of places in hotel quarantine. There's obviously concerns when we saw what happened in Victoria in particular, but we are working very, very closely with the states and territories to make sure that capacity can grow and we can get as many Australians back as possible.
There's lots of ways to do that. You could open up new facilities. You've got to get Victoria back online. Of course, they've been a real fly in the ointment here, but you could also shorten the quarantine and do some quarantine, at least from some countries, at home. Are we looking at all those options, or are people too paranoid about infection breakouts?
Well, look, obviously that's going to be ultimately a matter for the Health Minister and the Prime Minister, and working in consultation with medical officials and state and territory officials as well. So I wouldn't speak for them, but obviously we'll look at whatever reasonable measures can be taken to obviously keep people safe but bring people home as quickly as possible.
It has a big economic impact. I just saw the figures today that more than 400,000 Australians have come home. Now, this has got to be critical for the economy, doesn't it? Because we've cut off immigration. We're not having tourists coming here. We're not having international students coming here. So all these Aussies coming home are a welcome boost to the economy, aren't they?
Well, without a doubt, and as we're seeing restrictions in states and territories easing, as we're seeing state borders now reopening, I think we're going to see our economy continue to recover. We're going to see a lot of Australians travelling within Australia, which is fantastic, spending money in their state or indeed in other states across Australia, and we're already starting to see the signs of that. So yes, returning Australians would give the economy a boost, but also the easing of restrictions. And the fact that we've been able to manage this pandemic, I think, comparable to virtually every other nation on earth very well, puts us in a good position for all of those kind of things to happen. And then, of course, eventually, as we see vaccines rolled out, you know, we want to see more normality when it comes to international travel. But, of course, that is some way off.
What about the economic cost, though? I don't know that too many countries have racked up quite as much debt as us compared to their previous position in dealing with the pandemic, with a federal debt heading towards more than $1 trillion, and you're seeing Victoria now heading to $155 billion, New South Wales over $100 billion. You must be extraordinarily concerned about the level of government debt we're going to have in future generations and wonder how on earth we're ever going to pay it down.
Well, Chris, of course, we never would have chosen in ordinary circumstances to see debt increase as it has been this year because of decisions that we believe were absolutely necessary to support households, to support businesses, to support the economy and jobs. And that injection of funds has been very successful in those areas, and there's a lot of figures to back that up. But there's no doubt that comes with a significant cost to us as a nation. But the alternative of having Australians thrown out on the street, not able to pay their mortgages, not able to pay the bills, not able to look after their families, would have been horrific. And so these were the choices that we faced. But the good news, Chris, is that, and as S&P affirmed, as they affirmed our AAA credit rating this week, they affirmed that because we went into this crisis with such a strong balance sheet, because we've balanced the budget, the hard work that we've done as a government over these last 6 or 7 years did put us in a very good position to support families and households and businesses and the economy through this crisis. And yes, debt will go up, but comparable to virtually all other comparable nations, our debt levels will still be much, much lower.
Zed, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks very much, Chris.
Zed Seselja there, who is the Assistant Finance Minister.